speaker.
Hello everyone, my name is Facundo and today we will talk about how to view and react without a head. First of all, I want to introduce myself. My name is Facundo Giuliani. I'm a developer relations engineer at Storyblok. Storyblok is a headless content management system. We will talk about that in a little while. I'm one of the organizers of React Buenos Aires meetup. It's a meetup happening in Buenos Aires, Argentina, the place where I live, focused on React and other related technologies. I'm also a Prisma ambassador. Prisma is an ORM that you can use to connect to databases in your projects. I'm also an Auth0 ambassador. Auth0 is a platform that you can use to add security to your applications. And I'm also a Cloudinary media developer expert. Cloudinary is a platform that you can use to manipulate video and images for your project. You can find me on Twitter. I'm Facundo Zurdo. And please, if you have any message or you want to contact me, that's a good place to do that. So today we're going to talk about content management system. I wanted to talk about this concept. A CMS, or a content management system, is an application used to create and manage digital content. So basically we have a platform, an application that we will have an admin interface where the users can log in and can create content that they are going to use for their projects later, websites, blog posts, articles, news, etc. And the content that the users create through this admin interface will be stored in a database, and this database will have an integration with both the admin interface to create the content and also another integration with a particular view layer. So this view layer or presentation layer will be the one that will expose the content that the users are creating using a particular technology or framework. The complete platform that is offered, this CMS, probably you know some of them because these products are well known, like WordPress, Joomla, or Drupal. So they are like what we call traditional or monolithic CMSs because they offer the complete platform to create the content and to expose it. But these platforms have a limitation or an issue depending on the type of the project that we are creating. And the limitation is that, as we mentioned before, they allow the users to create the content, but they are tied to a particular presentation layer to display the content that they are creating. In the case, for instance, of WordPress, you are forced to use the programming language PHP to create the presentation layer for the content that you are creating. So you are forced to create a website. That's the only presentation layer or channel that you can use to expose the content that you are creating. And to create that website, you are forced to use PHP programming language. So with the new technologies and frameworks that started to appear in the market, this became a limitation. And because of that limitation, a new concept appeared in the market, the concept of the headless content management system. So a headless CMS, or a headless content management system, is a CMS where the content repository is separated or decoupled from the presentation layer. So we will have an architecture very similar to the one that we saw before, with an admin interface that we can use to create the content that we are going to expose in our projects. But this content that we are creating and that is going to be stored in a database will have an API that we can use to connect from any channel, any presentation layer that we want, and that is able to connect to a particular API. So we can expose the content that we are creating in different ways. We can expose it using a website, an e-commerce platform, a mobile application, a desktop application, even an application for smart devices like Amazon's Alexa or a smartwatch. We can even create a virtual reality application and an experience and consume the content that we are creating in a headless content management system, connecting to the API that is provided by this application. So we have the possibility of creating the content, and we provide that facility to the users, the content editors, and the marketers. But on the other hand, we can select the technology that we prefer to expose that content to the end users of our project. On the other hand, and this is a headless approach, we will be able to connect to other platforms and other services, so we are able to have custom integrations with other products while we are creating the content that we are going to expose to the end users. So if we compare these monolithic content management systems and the headless content management system, we can identify some differences. The first of these differences that we are going to identify is that in the headless content management systems, we will have a decoupled front end and back end, because the back end is a platform that the users are going to create the content in, and we will have the capabilities and the features to be able to create the content that we will later expose to the end users. And then the front end can be created by the developers of our team using the technology and the framework that they prefer. This will give us flexibility on the way that we use to expose the content that we are creating, because we can use that in different ways and expose that in different front ends and in different channels too. The developer experience and the user experience are going to be the first-class citizens, because while we are offering a great product for the content editors, the marketers, and other users to create the content, we are also offering the possibility to the developers to implement the front end and the presentation layer using the technology, the technologies, the frameworks, and the tools that they prefer and that they feel more comfortable using. And finally, as we mentioned, we will be able to create omni-channel experiences, because the content that we create once in the headless content management system will be able to be used, consumed, and displayed in different channels like mobile applications, desktop applications, and of course, websites. Today, we are going to focus on one of the headless content management systems that are available in the market, which is Storyblok. Storyblok is a headless content management system that offers two main, let's say, features or differences with other headless content management systems that are out on the market. The first feature is the visual editor. Storyblok offers the real-time visual editor, so the content editors and the users that want to create content will have a real-time preview of the content that they are creating, and they will have the possibility of managing the content that they are creating in a visual way. And on the other hand, Storyblok offers a component approach. The content that we are going to create using Storyblok will be organized in a way that we will have components that we can reuse in different parts of our pages or in different parts of our project too. So for instance, Storyblok, if you see, we can create different components or different parts of our pages, of our screens, like we will have a header component, a hero component, a grid component, and we can manipulate the content that we are creating in the platform following this component approach. In Storyblok, we call the components blocks. We will see that later, that we can create reusable blocks, so we organize the content that we are creating in the way that we can reuse these components in different parts of our pages and our project. And on the other hand, as I mentioned, we will have a real-time visual editor that the content editors and the marketers will use to create the content and to see how that content is going to look like before they publish it. So they don't need to run any build process, any publishing process. They don't need to request the development team to execute a certain task or a certain process to see the preview. That will be available while they are creating the content and in real time. So as we can see, Storyblok architecture is what we discussed before, very similar to any other headless content management system. We will have an admin interface, which will be the application of Storyblok. This application will be used to create the content that can be consumed using different APIs that Storyblok offers. And all this content that we are creating will be used in different channels and in different presentation layers. So as we mentioned before, we are providing this real-time visual editor to the content editors and creators. So we are focusing on the user experience. I mean, the users of Storyblok that are going to use the platform to create the content. But we also focus on the developers. As Storyblok is a headless content management system, you can connect any technology or any framework to Storyblok to consume the content and to use the content to be presented in any way. Today, I will talk about our React SDK because in the developer relations team in Storyblok, we created different tools and different packages that are going to be useful for the developers to create their projects and to connect Storyblok into their projects using different frameworks. These SDKs that I encourage you to take a look on the Storyblok official website will make the work easier for the developers to connect to the platform, to the headless content management system, to consume the content, to use the content in their projects, and also to implement this real-time visual experience that will be used by the content creators. Today, I will talk about the React SDK, so I will show you how you can create a React project and to connect to Storyblok to, again, consume the content and display it to your end users. And on the other hand, how to implement what we call the Storyblok bridge, which is the link that we are going to create between the front end of our application and the real-time visual editor that Storyblok offers. So if you're a developer, you are going to create your React project, and then you are going to install this Storyblok React package that will provide certain components and functions that we are going to use in the code of our application. Some of them can be seen in this code example. We will have a Storyblok init function that will be called at the beginning of the application to initialize the connection between our React project and the Storyblok Headless CMS. So we will use an access token to connect to a particular space or project in Storyblok. Then we will initialize an API client that we will use to retrieve the content from Storyblok using the REST API that Storyblok is offering. And then we will generate a link between the React components that we are going to have in our front end with the Storyblok components or blocks that we will have in our Headless CMS. So what we are going to generate with this is the possibility of clicking on the different components, the React components that we will have in the front end of our application while we are inside the real-time visual editor that Storyblok offers. And we will generate this link between the React components, which are the visual representation of our content, with the Storyblok components, which are the ones that we are going to use to create and manipulate the content for our project. On the other hand, we will also offer the possibility of initializing this connection using the Storyblok bridge that I mentioned before. So whenever you input a change in the content that you are creating inside the visual editor, you will see the changes being applied automatically in the real-time preview inside the visual editor. And as the Storyblok is not creating or generating this preview, it is using your real front end, your real application. You need to generate this connection in the code of your application. So while you are working in a development environment or testing environment, you can use this function that is called use Storyblok to initialize this connection using the Storyblok bridge to allow the content editors to create the content and to see that content being generated in real time. On the other hand, as we are going to render the content in our projects, this Storyblok React package offers a Storyblok component, which is a generic component, a generic React component that will render the correct markup depending on the component that we have in the content that we are creating and the visual representation that we created for that structure. We can go back to the previous code sample, but you can see that in the Storyblok init function, we have a components parameter that is a list which is linking the components and the name of the components that we have in Storyblok with the React components that we have in the front end of our application. And then we will create the markup for these React components, as you can see, and we will use another function called Storyblok Editable, which is a flag that we are adding to the markup of our React components to let Storyblok know that that component can be clicked and editable inside the Storyblok real-time visual editor. So if you click on those components inside the visual editor, you will be able to load the information related to those components, and you will be able to edit them and see the changes in real time in the visual editor. You can go to Storyblok official website and you will see that we have a tutorial which is named Add a Headless CMS to React in 5 minutes, in the case that you want to follow a guide after watching this talk. In the case that you want to learn more about Storyblok and how to connect Storyblok to a React project. But the truth is that with this new SDK that we created and that we implemented, instead of calling the tutorial Add a Headless CMS to React in 5 minutes, we should call it Add a Headless CMS to React in 2 minutes, and you have 3 more minutes to play Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix and listen to a great guitar solo. I'm a big Jimi Hendrix fan, so I encourage you to listen to that song while you are working with Storyblok. But the truth is that the tutorial is called how to connect Storyblok to React in 5 minutes, when it is way shorter than that. And I will show you that with a demo, with a quick demo that I created. Let me share with you this example project that I created, which is a blog with a home page. We have an image, we have different parts in our blog, in the home page of our blog. As you can see, we have a list of icons here. We have posts that we can browse. If I click on the blog page, you will see that I have all the list of blog posts that I have. And if I click on one of them, you will see that I have the different blog posts that I created. All this content that I created on my website, this is the home page of my website. What I'm going to show you now is that I will enter to the Storyblok application, which is this one, and I will enter to the home page. And this home page, I can edit it. As you can see, this is the real-time visual editor. On the left-hand side, we have the we are rendering the real front end of our application. I mean, this is my local copy of my website, which is running in a dev server locally, and we are rendering the content based on what we are creating inside the Storyblok real-time visual editor. Because this my project is connecting to this Storyblok space or project, and we are consuming the content that we are creating inside Storyblok with the project that I have in my local dev server. So as you can see, we have the different components that we are rendering in the home page of my website. You can see on the right-hand side that my page has a body property, and this body property has a list of blocks or components of different types. We have a teaser, we have a grid, and we have a feature post components. And what is cool about the visual editor that Storyblok offers is that I can edit these different components and I can see in real time the changes that I'm introducing. So I can put here the title and you can see how the content that I'm creating is being changed. This visual preview is offered by the content editor, so they can change and they can click on the different components of my page. As you can see, I clicked on a feature component. We are loading all the information, and again, I can change the content and you can see in real time how the content that I'm creating is going to look like. We are giving this possibility to the content editors so they can create the content and see the preview of the content without having to run any process, without having to execute any task from the development point of view. We can also change the structure of our page. We can add more blocks that we have available here. I can add a text component, for instance, and we are adding that at the bottom of the page. So I click on the text component that I just added and has a blank background. So I can put here the text, as you can see, and I can create the text. So what we are going to do is offering to the content editors the possibility of creating that content. What I'm going to show you now is, besides rendering the page that I'm creating here, and using the content that I'm creating inside Storyblok, how to initialize the Storyblok bridge to be able not only to render the content, but also to react to these different actions that are happening inside the Storyblok real-time visual editor. So I'm going to move to the code of my application, and I wanted to focus on some of the files that are, how to say, important for this project. I'm not going to show you all the code of the application because it's not fully related to this talk, but I just wanted to show you that I'm using here in the package.json file of my project, I have the Storyblok React package that I installed, the SDK that I mentioned before. This is what is going to provide us all the functionality related to Storyblok. And well, of course, this is a React project, so I have other dependencies installed. Besides the Storyblok React package that we are installing, then I will go to the source of my project and I will go to the index file, because in this index file, we are going to initialize the connection with Storyblok. You can see that here I'm importing two elements from the Storyblok React SDK. One is the Storyblok init function that we are going to run to initialize the connection with our space, and then the API plugin, because I'm going to use the API client to retrieve the content from the Storyblok API. On the other hand, we are listing all the React components that I'm going to use in my project and that I want to be able to edit inside the visual editor. I mean, these are the components that we are going to be able to click and edit inside the Storyblok real-time visual editor. I'm creating the components list. So as you can see, if we receive from the Storyblok API a feature component type, that means that we need to render a feature React component. And we are linking all the names of the components that are coming from the Storyblok API with the React representation of that component. I mean, the visual representation of that block, of that component. So we have all the React components that we created in our project here, and we are linking them with the key or the name of that component in Storyblok. And then we are actually running the Storyblok init function. So the function will take the access token to connect to my Storyblok space. Then we will use the API plugin. We are injecting this plugin to use the API client. And then we have the list of components that we created here. So we are telling Storyblok that which is the visual representation of each one of the components that we are creating in our space and how to render them in the front end of our application. Besides that, I will go to the application file, the main application file. So what you are going to see here is that we are using the other functions that are included in the Storyblok React package. We are going to use Storyblok, this use Storyblok function or hook to load the correct page that we are browsing from our project, and we are initializing the Storyblok bridge for that page. So as you can see, we are evaluating the slug of the page that we are visiting. That slug or that path, when we get the URL of the page that we are visiting, we are using this use Storyblok hook to load all the content related to the page that we are visiting. And besides loading this story, as we call them in Storyblok, the content items or the pages that we will have in our project, we are loading this story and we are and we are rendering the content related to that story, related to that content item. To do that, we will have a main layout, and then we have this generic Storyblok component that I mentioned before, because as we are able to add any component dynamically to the body of our page and to the structure of our content items, we don't really know which components we are going to render or which blocks we are going to load. So we use this generic Storyblok component to render according to the content that we need to show based on what is coming from the Storyblok API when we retrieve the information using the API client. So we are loading this block or this component using the generic Storyblok component, and this Storyblok component will load the information based on the logic or based on the correct components that we are bringing from the API. So in our case, for the page, what this Storyblok component is going to do is retrieve the information related to the home page, which is the one that we visited in the visual editor. This home page will load the main layout, and inside of it, it will render what is coming from here. As we can see, we have a page component or block. This page, then if we see, as we saw in the index file, we are for the page component that is coming from Storyblok, we are going to render the React page component. So if I go to the components folder here, you will see that I have a page component, and this, for each one of these components or blocks, we are going to put the flag that I mentioned before, Storyblok Editable, to let the Storyblok visual editor know that this page can be edited and be clickable inside the visual editor. And whenever we are changing the value of any property, we are going to show the change instantly inside the visual editor. So for the page, what we are going to do is, if we receive a block of type page, we are going to inspect the body of the page. And for the body of the page, we are going to render a generic component for each one of the blocks that we have inside our body. So you can see here the body property. We have 4 blocks of different component types. So we are using the generic component that will render, in our case, we are going to render the first component, which is a teaser. If we go again to the index file, we will see that for the teaser component, we are going to render a React teaser component. So if I go to the components that I created for my React project, you can see the teaser here. And again, we have all the markup related to that block or component to show the content based on the different properties. As you can see, the teaser has a headline property and an image property. So if I go again to the code, you can see that here we are using, for this block of type teaser, I'm rendering the headline of my blog, and I'm using the image to get the file name, the alt text, and etc. And the same will happen with all the components that we are using in the front end of our application. We have here the grid, which will render all the columns that are generic components. And if I go to the visual editor, you can see that we have a grid which has a columns field, and this columns field has a list of features. So what we are going to render for each one of these columns is a feature component. So here we have all the markup related to the feature component, and we are going to use all the HTML style that we want to use the information related to each one of the features that we are rendering. So this is a short example on how to use a Storyblok. If you want to learn more about Headless CMS and the headless approach, you can go to the first link of this slide. If you want to learn more about the real-time visual editor from Storyblok, you can visit the second link of this slide. If you want to learn more about how to connect a React project to Storyblok, you can go to the third link of this slide. And then if you want to learn more about the React SDK itself, you can go to the last link of this slide that you are seeing here. So I encourage you to visit the Storyblok website. You will have different tutorials and guides on how to implement a headless approach on your project and how to connect Storyblok with different technologies and frameworks. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I hope you learned something new today. And I hope you keep enjoying the event, the summit. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. I really hope you got some value from that. And by the way, if you want more where that came from, we want to invite you to be a part of our community. Go to composability.dev and register today. If you've already registered, you know what I'm talking about. And by the way, if you're on Twitter at all, go to JavaScript Jam and follow us. Why? Because every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we go live. Yeah, live on Twitter Spaces. And you can join us and be with us there while we're live. Heck yeah. You know what? And it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or you've been doing this forever. We love everybody being involved. We bring so many people up to the stage. We have so many great conversations. We want you to be a part of it. All right. We'll see you there.